You might remember a trust fall from some terrible team bonding session. But how about a trust leap? A trust leap is something that you're asking anyone going through change to do, whether you realize that or not. And what's more, everybody's trust leap is different. Some are longer, some are higher, and that realization changes everything. In today's Change Signal episode, we're talking to Rachel Botsman, the world's most known trust expert, who has defined trust as a confident relationship with the unknown. That's a real break from the way trust is normally defined, and it's brilliant. You're going to discover why resistance can in fact be an extraordinary source of energy, and why you must change or change communication to talk to different people who have different trust leaps to make. This is a brilliant conversation, and I think it's going to uncover new insights into one of the really unspoken superpowers of great change leadership. I'm Michael Bungay-Stanier. This is Change Signal, the podcast where we cut through the blather and the BS and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change, transformation, and growth. When someone says, "Hey, you can trust me," I immediately think, not likely. I mean, there is nothing less reassuring than that declaration. And of course, here's the paradox. When we're involved in change and transformation in our organizations, we could really do with people's trust. I mean, all of the people, our team, our bosses, the sponsors, the people we're hoping will come along for the ride with us. And in initiating change, we're asking people to leave what's known for what's unknown. We're asking them to step into ambiguity and uncertainty and risk. And of course, here's what we end up saying, implicitly or explicitly: you can trust me. I'm a change leader.
You cannot have change without trust, and that is going to depend on context. So saying, "Oh, everyone trusts this change program," even thinking in that way is problematic.
That's Rachel Botsman, the world's expert on trust, a fellow and teacher at Oxford University, one of the Thinkers 50, an author, and, as she describes herself, an artist. Now, as a change practitioner, it is an art to build trust. I've started thinking of it like glass blowing. You're working and shaping something molten. It takes strength of muscle and delicacy of breath and vision. You're working in a furnace. You're shaping and adapting as you go. Using science and art, what you create is both beautiful and fragile. I know I may just have overworked that metaphor some, but this conversation is going to be less florid and it's going to be fantastic. So Rachel, welcome.
It's great to be here. And I love the setup because this is one of my favorite topics, trust, change, and uncertainty. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah. We're talking to people who lead change. And just to kind of like lay the stakes on the table, what's your best guess at what change leaders fundamentally misunderstand about trust?
Well, I think, and I know from talking to people in that position, and it's a very, very difficult role, they don't ask the question, what trust state is someone in? So in the same way that people in marketing would think of customer segments and understand that you have to adapt communications and support and messaging based on that segmentation, it's no different for employees where everyone is going to be in a different trust state in terms of their perception of the risk and therefore their willingness to change.
That's great. What are the different types of trust states that people can be in?
So the best way to actually visualize this is the first thing to understand is that to make any change happen, you have to take what I call a trust leap. And you have to get them over the sea of uncertainty into the unknown and to understand the benefits of the change.
Yeah.
Now, the way people perceive that risk involved really depends on how high they experience the leap.
Right.
Now, the risk might be real and it might be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
It might be for some people to do with financial risk. It might be creative risk. It might be personal risk. It might be psychological. It might be physical risk. And that will inform their trust state. So if they're in a super high trust state and they have just a very high tolerance to uncertainty, they're high trust states people.
Right.
But the majority of people are not high trust states people.
These people are wonderful to me because they're like, woohoo, bring it on, let's go for it. But they're not quite unicorns, but they're a rare breed.
Yeah, and they're not early adopters. So people are, these are the people who are the first. No. They're not always the first to new technologies or shiny gadgets. It's a wiring, and some people will have a very high tolerance to creative risk and a terrible response to financial risk. And if people are asking lots of questions and they need lots of information and there's lots and lots of resistance, they're in a low trust state. It's not that they're against change, but they need different support and communication. So my pet peeve is when you see consultancies come in and they develop a change communication program that they're going to roll out. And you're like, that's not going to work.
Right. I'm going to leap in here just to make this explicit because honestly, this is a big aha moment for me. The trust leap will be different for different people depending on both their natural wiring and also on context. You have to speak to people differently. If I'm a change leader, how should I be thinking about my relationship with those different states that people might be in? I love that way you've helped us already see marketers segment and do things differently, different messages, different channels, different approaches. And that's so powerful already. How might I do that for the people who I'm trying to lead through change?
Yeah. How you get people to trust you, you have to sort of work on both groups. So you have to find what I call your trust influencers.
Right.
And these are often unexpected people. So just to give you an example, because I think this really brings it to life. Are you familiar? They're now called Wise, but they were called Transfer Wise. It's like a money exchange.
Right, the money exchange, for sure, yeah. Oh, if you haven't come across this service, Wise is an app and a platform for transferring money between different countries and currencies, basically making it easier and cheaper than through a bank or whatever.
So when they first launched, their instinct was, the early adopters are going to be like smartphone users and younger people and people who don't have a physical relationship to money. Yes, but they're not your trust influencers.
Right.
Their trust influencers were pensioners in Spain that were sending money backwards and forwards from Spain to the UK and were getting hit on rates. And these are like people that use checks. They go into a bank and they knew that if they could get them to switch to TransferWise, now Wise, that would provide the social proof for other people to follow. So if pensioners in Spain who are dependent on this income trust this platform, there must be a real benefit there. So that I say is rule number one is like look in unexpected places. Who are your trust influencers that are going to provide the social proof? Tied to that is getting super clear on the benefit. And we are selfish individuals. So another mistake is this is going to be great for our organization, right? I am a we person, but the we does not work here. It is the I. So what is in it for me, my role, my job, my life? And that's hard when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of employees. But if that benefit is not clear, people are not going to move. So that's sort of your high influence group.
As you look at how you're guiding your organization right now, dear listener, would you say you know who your trust influencers are? Are you really using them to full effect? Because almost certainly they're scattered up and down and throughout your organization.
The low trust group, you have to manage with care. And I should say these aren't always difficult people. These are often employees that are very invested and engaged in the organization, which is why they are asking questions that can feel like resistance. It can feel like friction.
Right. They're kind of conservative in that classic sense, which is, I want to protect the past. I want to protect what's good about where we've been and who we are. And are anxious about losing that.
I really care about our culture. I really care about our people. I really care about this product or this service or this tiny piece of packaging that we might be changing, whatever it is. And that friction is energy. We have to remember that. That's not like defensive or disengagement or disenchanted. That is someone saying, I really care that we do this right. And so how you create the right forums and space to genuinely listen to people's concerns before you get to that stage of benefits. And it's another sort of term I use, which is understanding what is the trust barrier in the way. And I guarantee what you think is the trust barrier as the leader is completely different from what surfaces. And I find that disconnect really, or that gap really fascinating.
Have you seen a pattern between what the kind of the generator of the change might think is the barrier and what ends up being the real barrier for people? Is there a kind of pattern to that?
Oh, that's another good question. So leaders often think the barrier is skills and technology.
Yeah.
They just don't understand how the system works, or they're scared it's going to take their job away, or it involves doing something differently. And it can be those things, but those things are quite solvable. It's usually far more emotional. It's usually far more to do with basics of human nature, like safety and belonging.
Right.
And sometimes like just the time frame is a struggle, right? So I haven't seen a change program really work in under 2 years, like where you really see these big organizations turn. And so when it's like a 3-month campaign, when it's put in campaign mode, that in itself can create a barrier because people are like, this is just going to happen too quickly.
Rachel, the title of your audiobook is How to Trust and Be Trusted. My guess is that often we spend a lot of time going, how do I get people to trust me? And we spend less time around how do I increase my own capacity to trust others. But if you think about this idea of, physician, heal thyself, or, Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world, I would imagine that part of having people trust you is increasing your own capacity to trust others. How would you coach me on beginning to expand my own capacity to trust others?
Well, that's a good question. I should say, that title, I didn't come up with it. It came up because the producer who was working on the audiobook with me, suddenly I was in the studio and I've never thought of trust as a two-way thing.
Right.
Like she was so focused on like, you need to trust me, that she hadn't thought that she hadn't even thought about how to trust others. So if I was coaching you on this, the first thing I would say is, so Michael, what areas of your life do you feel like you become controlling?
Oh, well, that's it. I would answer, there are specific things in my business where I get quite twitchy about things. Sometimes it's things like I've lost sight of where something is in its cycle and its process. I mean, I don't actually mind if things fail. I just don't like it if they've just disappeared into a void and I'm like, what's happening here? That makes me kind of tense up. Secondly, the way I personally get represented out in the world, like I've got a point of view and I've got a distinctive voice and I've got things that I stand for and things that I don't stand for. And I've been kind of banging on about that for too long, 30 years or something now. So when my voice gets misrepresented and kind of my intention feels more self-serving than I want it to be, those are all things that make me get a little more controlling.
And I would imagine, not to put words in your mouth, but that's where you sort of go from like that macro leadership into that micromanagement.
Totally. I'm like, I'm a big-hearted, trusting guy. Oh, I'm suddenly not. I'm suddenly, just allow me to meddle at 8 levels below that I should be leveling, for sure.
Why did you put that subtitle out?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, control is a sign of where you find it hard to trust other people. And that can stem from a really good place, because the things you're talking about, your career depends on them, right? So you really care about them. So to let go of those things is really difficult. Now, that is sort of one area where it can be really, really hard to trust. And what I would say around those areas is explaining your intention, explaining your expectations around this. You're probably going to find it hard to change your behavior around those things because they are so close to who you are.
Right.
There's then like a second area of trust issues that are not productive.
Right.
And I would say, like, what are the areas in your life where you're just like too busy? Like it's, if you could get rid of that and change time and just let go of it, your life could genuinely change, because they're the people you need to find to trust. They're either missing from your life, or you haven't asked them to do the thing. You haven't placed that thing of value with them.
That's interesting.
And so it's kind of like separating out those two things, recognizing, like for me, because I'm so obsessed with design, I'm always going to drive my team mad when they use 16 instead of 12-point font, right? Which is ridiculous, but they know that about me, right?
Right.
How things look when they go out is very important to me.
Right, exactly.
But I've recognized, like, financial operations, stuff like that. I had to find someone. I had to trust them. I had to let that go, even like in my life, right? So I think it's really going, where is space and time a problem? Because I am not trusting someone, either because I don't know how to, or because I haven't found the right person.
Yeah. I notice in my exchange with you leading up to this podcast, I didn't have any exchange with you leading up to the podcast. Your assistant or I'm not sure what title you'd give them, managed all of that correspondence.
Relationship manager, actually.
Perfect.
She's,
Yeah. And I'm just in that process myself of having Claudine take over my email, because I've just noticed how it gets in the way of my artisanal life of trying to create. I'm like, oh, look, when in doubt, just waste my life in an inbox. But it's taken us quite a long time to get to that place where she's now running my inbox. We're still not quite there, but we're getting there. We're getting really close. And it's been a much longer, harder experience than I thought it would be, because technically it's straightforward, but emotionally it's quite hard.
It's quite hard, and that is a trust exercise. So this might actually be helpful to share, because I think you can apply it to different situations. So first of all, the person you're mentioning, I've worked with for a long time, 6 years.
Yeah.
We did change her title for that reason. Like she is not an executive assistant. She is managing relations on my behalf.
Right.
She doesn't CC me.
Right.
That's the act of trust, because the way I define trust is it's a confident relationship with the unknown. So if you're in the loop of everything, you're not trusting. If I don't see how those emails go out, I'm not looking at them going, I would have said that slightly differently, right? Do you know what I mean? Which is what I would do. And it's also having the trust that if she's not sure how to handle something, she will flag it and we will talk it through.
Right.
We have a process at the end of the day. We do not ping each other during the day. She summarizes everything in one email that has come in, with all the context and the links. And then it's like, action this, FYI this. So it doesn't feel like that to you.
Right.
But I am actually very aware of all the conversations you've had, even though I'm not the one replying. So these things, trust often depends on very, very good systems.
Right.
Not just relationships. Like that's what enables you to let go, is having the system in place where you don't have to hold on so tightly.
And of course, I do hope you'll tune into future podcast episodes to hear updates of my own personal journey of building systems, getting out of email, and even further, more deeply trusting Claudine. That's a wonderful definition, a confident relationship with the unknown. Can you tease that apart for us?
Yeah, it took me a very long time to come up with that, because
it feels like it's simplicity on the other side of complexity, where you're like, oh, that explains it. But my goodness, I can just feel the amount of work to craft that in such an elegant way.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's a tension in it, right? Like there's a tension in that definition. And the reason why it was so hard was because, trust is something that's been studied now for over 60 years. A lot of the theorists are male.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, a lot of the definitions are about knowing what to expect, knowing the outcome of something. And that always, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was like, that feels like the antithesis of trust, because
exactly.
if you know how something's going to turn out, very little trust is required. It's kind of like a
Right.
low trust situation. So I started to think about systems that are so complex that you're never going to be able to understand them, like
Exactly.
artificial intelligence, algorithms, whatever it might be.
Life.
Life,
Just life
right?
in general, yeah. It's like everything is complex and very little is complicated, which is like finally understanding it. Feels like I'm an engineer rather than I have a relationship and an understanding of complexity, which is like you never know what the hell's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm obsessed with that distinction between something being complex and something being complicated, which I spend a lot of time thinking about. But most things do sit in the air. It's particularly things related to uncertainty and ambiguity. And, so it was like, how do I describe that tension? There has to be something that is solid because trust is that kind of glue and that foundation, but also expressing it's not needing to know what someone is up to. So I actually think I came out of the definition, I think 15 years ago, but I think it's become more relevant as we live in a culture that is really encouraging monitoring and surveillance and constant checking in. That is not trust.
I mean, you've got systems all around pushing for certainty. You've also got a very ancient part of your brain that much prefers certainty over uncertainty. Do you have any guidance on how you rise above this to increase your own capacity for sitting with ambiguity and uncertainty?
Yes, I do. And it's something I think you can practice. I don't know if you're familiar with John Keats' term negative capability.
Of course. Yeah.
So you might explain it slightly different from me, but I became really intrigued by this idea. So Keats was a poet. He wrote a letter to his brother. He used this term negative capability. And I thought it was so interesting. Again, it's a tension word because so much of our life, this ties to uncertainty, by the way, it's tied to positive capabilities, right? Like from a very young age, it's like doing and skills and competence and grades and results and getting things done. And what Keats was saying is that the greatest minds in science and the arts, they have high negative capability. They have this incredibly high tolerance to uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And this struck me as really interesting. And I started digging into it and I found that capability, the root word of that is capex. And capex means space.
Oh, great.
Like container to hold space. And so this, I think, is like really beautiful to visualize. Like imagine like a container that is really, really small because it can't hold the uncertainty, and the negative capability is someone who can expand that space.
Right.
So in my own like sort of life and thinking, it's really like being like, okay, I'm now having that, like, I'm trying to find certainty in something where there is no answer. And you have to go back to like, does this feel expansive? Am I holding the complexity? Mm-hmm. And it's different from everyone. So I can't give a prescriptive toolkit, but what I can say is even when you develop an awareness to the reaction and response, you are starting to work that muscle. And I think leaders, particularly change leaders, should have entire programs on negative capability. They're often not great at sort of tolerating uncertainty, right? They're often the one, it's a generalization, but let's have milestones and markers, and we're going to tick this, and you feel those leaders where like, oh, they can hold so much, right? They can hold this space for others and themselves.
You know, part of what I love about your language and your insights, Rachel, is you've used a couple of times this idea of tension. And there's something about realizing that an aliveness comes from the tension rather than the decrease of tension. So feeling it as not as a bug, but as a feature of something's working if I'm feeling this tension.
Is a beautiful way to frame it. And it's a tension that is inherent in change. And sometimes I think change is like, it's the push-pull of a magnet. It's the positive and the negative. Yeah. And so in any change programs, you've got to have those things that pull people forward. And then you've got to recognize they're going to be pushed backwards or pulled backwards. And so being comfortable with that tension and recognizing when that's happening and that it's okay, I think is a really important part of change management.
What needs to be said that hasn't yet been said about the importance and the role of trust in a change process?
It's such a fundamental thing, but trust enables change, and change can really damage trust. So it's the fragility of these things, I think, are sometimes not respected enough. Like the emotion in organizations around change is often like force and momentum and acceleration. And I'm a huge believer in all those things. But I would also say words like fragility and care and patience and slowness, they need to become part of the language of change. Move fast and break things. Worst mantra ever. Don't break people. Break ideas, but don't break people. So, yeah.
Rachel, where can people find more about you and your work?
If you want to really dive deeper into these ideas, I made this book called How to Trust and Be Trusted. You can find it, I'm going to sound like an advert now, but like on Audible or Spotify, wherever you get your audiobooks from. It's intentionally written in audio because I know how to express these ideas through my voice and to teach people. So it's an experience. It's also something you can give to your employees and they can listen on the way to work, and you'll see they'll start to develop a common language. So that's really important. And then if you want to sign up for my newsletter, which is called Rethink, the easiest way is just go to rachelbotsman.com.
Rachel, thank you.
Pleasure.
So 3 things I want to link together from this absolutely delightful conversation. First, Keats's idea of negative capability. In a letter to his brother, he called it, here's the quote, being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. So second, let me tie to that, loosely and with translucent silk, Rachel's definition of trust. Here it is, a confident relationship with the unknown. I love this because it immediately moves trust away from a vague jazz-handing sort of thing to something I can actually deeply understand. This is what it means. And finally, I want to link an idea of my own about what it means to have humility. Humility can be a slippery word. So I don't mean diminishing yourself, kind of beating yourself up, oh, I'm no good. And nor do I mean it in the humble brag sort of way, which, as far as I can tell, to be honest around this, it feels like that's the opposite of humble. Humility for me means having your feet on the ground. It literally has the same word origins as humus, that dark, rich soil. So I think of humility meaning you are clear and comfortable about your strengths and your weaknesses. You are grounded in your own capabilities. And in that groundedness, in that moment of steadiness, you're best able to trust. And of course, I trust you're enjoying the pod. Please do give it some love if you haven't already. I do want this to be people's favorite podcast about change, transformation, and growth. And for that to be true, people need to find it. If this episode in particular spoke to you, please recommend it to a friend or perhaps mention it on LinkedIn. And if you do, tag me. And of course, you'll find a weekly newsletter from me at thechangesignal.com. It's short, it's practical, it's helpful. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you're with us.